Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Professor Zakur, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining today. I'm excited to share some of the works we have been doing here, and in this talk, I'll discuss how differential game theory can be applied to design smarter conservation incentives. And this is joint work with my PhD student, Benham, who is also joining us online. Um, the Department of Homeland Security identifies 16 critical infrastructure sectors that underpin the functioning of society and the economy. And here you can see four sectors out of 16, which represent the application domains of my research program. These infrastructure systems are mathematically described as large scale networks which are interdependent at cyber-physical levels, governed by several sectors working together. They operate within broader social systems, including organizational structures, community values, various resource allocation practices, and information sharing and communication protocols. And there are external stresses, such as disruptive events like human errors and natural disasters, which can impact the system's performance. And over the past decade or so, each infrastructure sector has become more integrated, advocates resource sharing and operational research interventions to improve their performance measures. And this implies the importance of understanding the collective behavior of the stakeholders for the resilience of these critical infrastructure systems. And today's talk is focused on water systems. From a centralized viewpoint, resource allocation decisions such as assigning work crews, money, equipment supplies within such a network of networks under disruptive events involve two interrelated problems. First, identifying critical components to prioritize, and second, scheduling the resources to expedite recovery. And the decision-making process becomes very time and safety critical when thousands of network components are affected, like the 2020 ice storm event in Oklahoma or the 2021 Texas power outage. The ambiguity surrounding the impact of these disruptive events, like the exogenous ones, and the decisions made earlier by different stakeholders, the endogenous component introduces additional layers of complexity to decision-making models. And in this research trust, we have focused on optimality and scalability for single objective, multi-objective, and multi-stage stochastic problems. Now, studying behavioral aspects of decision making with a focus on stakeholders has influenced existing modeling approaches. In fact, the coexistence of cooperative and conflicting objectives has driven significant growth in the decision science literature, which seeks low complexity algorithms that account for information sharing structures, as well as the timing and content of shared information and decentralized and dynamic network models. And the decentralized decision-making paradigm, as you might know, individual decision makers allocate resources over time while collectively enhancing overall network safety and performance. In this research trust, we have focused on optimality, scalability, and stability conditions across discrete and continuous time frameworks, as well as designing incentives for key stakeholders to ensure fair sharing of profit and risk. Some of our earlier work, which I listed on this slide, focused on formulating and solving cooperative games, either grand coalitions of stakeholders or coalition structures within network models to define fairness criteria such as Shapley value and to ensure the long-term functioning of coalitions. In these settings, decision makers are not given the opportunity to revise their strategies over time. However, in many applications, such as water systems, state variables are dynamic and decision makers need to adapt and adjust their strategies, particularly under disruptive events such as droughts. For the rest of this presentation, I will focus on dynamic games and water systems, but I want to first discuss why water systems. The Growing concern over water scarcity and the management of freshwater resources is shared both locally and globally. The rapid expansion of the global economy has also heightened human demand for water, leading to overuse and mismanagement. So, freshwater resources, both surface and groundwater, are a vital component of environmental systems and are essential for human and societal development. In fact, two of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, and Goal 14, life below water, especially address the importance of clean water provision and the protection of aquatic ecosystems. Agriculture is the largest consumer of water, accounting for approximately 70% of the world's freshwater resources. And in this context, water conservation incentives are recognized as a critical strategy for reducing conflict among water users and promoting responsible water stewardship. To put this into perspective, here you can see the Red River Basin Network located across Texas and Oklahoma in the US. And this is a dynamic system of upstream, midstream, and downstream surface and groundwater users who continuously interact and share agricultural water resources over time. Meanwhile, other stakeholders such as NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and state-level water resource boards monitor the overall health of the basin network, particularly as drought conditions amplify the challenges of sustainable water management. Differential game theory is well suited to address these dynamic challenges, particularly in scenarios with unevenly distributed information, as it allows stakeholders to adjust their strategies over time. And this is specifically important for water conservation, where continuous time feedback between stakeholders and network level variables need to be captured to understand and quantify the overlapping social, economic, and environmental impacts. In this framework, the utility function is integrated over time, and state variables are functions of time. And by solving the differential game, we can characterize the optimal controls and evolution of state variables along trajectories generated by the interactions among stakeholders and network dynamics. I'm going to present how we formulated and solved a non-cooperative differential game for designing a smarter water conservation incentives. We consider a river basin network with heterogeneous groundwater and surface water users interacting with an NGO that is offering monetary incentives to change water consumption behavior. Here, we have both horizontal and vertical interactions among decision makers, and horizontal interactions refer to relationships among water users of the same type within the network, like groundwater or surface water users. And these interactions capture how users' willingness to participate in an incentive program affects their peers, as well as how upstream water consumption influences the availability of water for downstream users. Vertical interactions, on the other hand, refer to the relationships among decision makers in different subnetworks, such as groundwater users, surface water users, and the NGO, whose decisions mutually influence one another. As you can see, the state variables are the water volumes in the aquifer and the river, and these dynamics determine the environmental quality of the river basin. The research question we are trying to answer are the following. How should conservation organizations determine their incentive allocations? And how can a scalable solution method be designed to solve non-cooperative dynamic games with a large number of players at basin level? And what parameters can influence the choice of solution methods in the decision-making process? We made some assumptions to formulate the utility functions for water users and the NGO, which are listed here. It's assumed that water users employ water only for agricultural purposes, and water users' willingness to participate in the NGO's incentive program depends on both the NGO's efforts towards them and the influence of peers' willingness to participate in the conservation incentive program as presented in this formula. This is sigmoid formula, which is a logistic function, the same function used in logistic regression, and it captures the expected S-curve behavior. As more peers participate, my willingness to participate in the incentive programs increases. Rivers and aquifers are often coupled systems where groundwater contributes to the stream flow, especially during dry periods. It's assumed that when the aquifer gets low enough, streams are hydrologically decoupled from the aquifer and no longer receive any groundwater input. And we work closely with our hydrologist collaborator to define the simplified indicator function, as you can see here. And we also assume that water users are aware of the effects of water levels in both the river and aquifer under circumstances, particularly regarding risk of droughts. It's also assumed that NGO will obtain environmental benefit for each unit of the saved water. Here you can see the utility function of groundwater users. We have the discount rate for the value of money over time, the benefit of using water through crop sales, costs, the monetary incentives that they receive from the NGO, and the environmental benefit of having more water in the river. The constraint is the water balance equation over time. We have inflow of water to the aquifer, water consumption by users, the rate of entering water from the aquifer to the river if they are coupled. Now, we can solve this problem analytically using the Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation, as you can see here for the optimal water consumption. Here, lambda is the shadow price, and it represents the impact of an additional volume of water in the aquifer on the future welfare of the water users. And it's a function of environmental benefit, discount rate, and delta, which is the rate of entering water from the aquifer to the river. Surface water users have a similar utility function with a slight difference in their water balance equation, where we have the inflow of water to the river, water consumption, rate of entering water from aquifer, and precipitation. So here, the last term represents the precipitation rate. And similarly, we can solve this problem analytically and obtain the optimal water consumption and shadow price. Moving on to the NGO's utility function, it includes the environmental benefit as well as the cost associated with designing the incentive, such as time, money, and effort. The constraint represents the total budget available for monetary incentives. And by examining the structure of the Hessian matrix, the second derivatives of the utility function with respect to all decision variables, we show that the NGO's utility function can be either convex or non-convex, depending on the problem setting and parameters such as cost coefficients and environmental benefit, as shown here. Now, if it is a convex optimization, we can apply Korsh-Cohen-Tucker conditions to the Lagrangian function. And this systems of equations and inequalities which guarantee feasibility and optimality needs to be solved using numerical optimization methods. But for the non-convex case, we need to apply iterative methods such as value iteration for approximate dynamic programming to find near optimal decisions. These methods have convergence limitations when applied to larger scale problems. So we propose that by employing the first degree basis function approximation, the utility function of the NGO can be transformed into convex optimization forms, as you can see here. In other words, we replace the nonlinear components with linear approximation and then solve the resulting problem using the KKT conditions. And to put this into perspective here, you can see the computation time comparison between value iteration and the basis function approximation method against the number of players in the decision game. When we have 15 water users, the value iteration will not find a solution within 24 hours, our computational limit. So scalability is critical for this application domain. Now, to demonstrate the model's applicability, conduct sensitivity analysis, we defined a practical problem set. We draw information from publicly available databases to find crop values over different periods of time, information on water withdrawal for surface water and groundwater users. And our problem involves one NGO, 7 groundwater users, and 5 surface water users operating across 3 seasons, as you can see in this figure. So water users, as I mentioned earlier, irrigate crops across 3 seasons: a spring, first time interval, summer, second time interval, and fall, the third time interval. After characterizing the NGO's utility function, we identified that the problem is non-convex in all seasons. So we obtained near optimal decision variables for water users and the NGO. You can see the results in this table. The second column shows the near optimal NGO's decision variable effort level. The third column shows the willingness of water users to participate in the NGO's incentive program, which is directly affected by the NGO's effort level. The fourth column presents the monetary incentives offered to water users. The fifth column shows water consumption after the NGO's incentive offer, determining whether the water user accepts or reject the offer. If the water consumption equals the water demand, the incentive offer is rejected. However, if water consumption after incentive is lower than water demand, the offer is accepted by the water user. And finally, the last column shows the amount of water saved in each time interval or season. I would like to draw your attention to the fourth groundwater user, G4, in this table, and we can see that increasing the effort level raises water users' willingness. However, the offered incentive may still be considered unreasonable according to the water user's utility function. In other words, the willingness of water user alone does not guarantee their participation in the program. The NGO should really offer a reasonable conservation incentive. Another observation, in the fall season, the last column, only 3 water users accept the offered incentives. Now, the varying budgets for incentives across different time intervals or season allow us to observe its impact on incentives offered and the water users' decisions. And here, the figure on the left shows the available budget for each season, the offered incentive by the NGO. In the spring and summer seasons, the NGO uses more than 80% of available funds, and the NGO can increase its effort across multiple water users, considering their influence and level of water consumption. In the fall season, with the limited budget compared to other seasons, NGO provides compelling incentives only to 3 water users with significant influence on others. To better understand the dynamic changes in the system's state level, the figure on the right shows the trajectory of water in the river with and without incentives. And as you can see here, in the incentivized scenario, due to water conservation efforts, the amount of water is higher compared to the non-incentivized scenario. To perform sensitivity analysis on environmental benefits, we consider different values of shadow prices, lambda values. As I showed in the propositions, these are directly affected by the environmental benefits coefficients of water users. And in the figure on the left, the analysis shows that as lambda increases, the average incentive paid decreases. So this implies that the environmental revenue coefficient is pivotal in enabling users to accept lower monetary incentives. The other part of the sensitivity analysis focused on the water users' demand before the NGO's incentive offer. As the demand for water user 1 increases, both the revenue and cost functions of water consumption will rise accordingly. And after a certain demand point, in here 650 cubic meter, reducing water consumption and accepting the NGO's offer become reasonable. And this demonstrates that when the water demand is high, the cost of water consumption can motivate water users to accept the NGO's offer. We also looked at the impact of budget and environmental benefit on problem convexity. And on the left side graph, we can see that the feasible effort level increases with the budget size. For budget sizes of $100K and $500K, the problem exhibit non-convex behavior across all feasible effort levels. In contrast, for the other budget sizes, the problem initially shows non-convex behavior, but transitions to convex behavior as the effort level increases. On the right-hand side figure, we only vary fee values or environmental benefit from $5 to $50 per cubic meter while keeping other parameters constant. When the parameter is $5, $10, and $20, the problem is a convex optimization across the entire feasible effort level. For other values, we have non-convex optimization problems, and this suggests that a lower fee or environmental coefficient ensures the convexity of the optimization problem. Now, I would like to present key managerial insights from our model and sensitivity analysis, offering practical guidance for NGOs, and then open the floor for questions. First, higher environmental revenue coefficient, the fee values, lead to lower average incentive payments by NGOs. And these coefficients reflect users' awareness of long-term water level impacts. So we have 2 scenarios here. For low awareness scenario, NGOs should invest in education, outreach, and communication. So actions could be environmental education, collaborative learning, and social media campaigns. and the outcome could be higher participation and reduced risk, and at the end, better resilience to drought seasons. For the high awareness scenario, NGOs can design more efficient incentive schemes with lower payments. The recommendation is to prioritize regions with existing ecological awareness. Secondly, as irrigation demand increases, um, the rising cost of water consumption motivates users to accept incentives. So NGOs should target high demand regions to lower the average incentive payments, maximize water saving impact, and improve cost effectiveness of the program. Next, peer influence significantly affects the NGO effort allocation, and NGOs need to allocate more effort to influential users, those who affect others' decisions. Recommendations are like rank water users by influence based on their social, spatial, or community proximity, and focus on engagement and incentives on top influencers, which lead to the ripple effect on others. And NGOs need to consider the dynamic nature of willingness and acceptance. NGO effort influences willingness to participate over multiple time intervals, and we demonstrated that early effort may not lead to immediate acceptance, but it definitely builds long-term engagement. Acceptance still depends on evolving conditions like irrigation demand, water revenue, available budget for NGOs. And one example is that a higher offer may be rejected for one season, but a lower one can be accepted later. Last but not least, NGO need to understand the peer effects over time. Highly influential users affect the future willingness of less influential peers. Initial NGO focus on influencers can indirectly raise participation among others, and over time, the accumulated willingness plus proper incentives would lead to the broader adoption. And one example that we discussed was the forced groundwater user in the fall season that their acceptance was delayed, but yet positive peer participation drive their behavior. And to summarize everything, in terms of strategic recommendations for NGOs, we recommend that they invest in awareness building to reduce long-term incentive costs, target high demand and high influence users first for maximum program efficiency, and recognize participation as a multi-period process, and eventually persistence pays off. And leverage peer dynamics to scale conservation outcomes organically. This work is published in the Informed Decision Analysis Journal, where you can find more technical details. It was also selected by Informed Press and several other news outlets to be featured for a broader audience. And since then, we have received several inquiries from municipalities seeking to learn more and evaluate how this approach could be adopted and communicated to their community members. So let me pause here and open the floor for questions before moving on to the extended framework.
Do we have questions, comments? I have one, Shima, regarding the structure of the game. It's not clear to me how the game is played. So you have the NGO, and after that you have two types of players, right?
Correct.
Surface and ground. And it seems that you are solving each one of the models separately. I mean, are they playing a game really between?
Yes, they are. Well, this is a non-cooperative game. It means that they make their decisions separately.
No, but this I understand, but what is the connection between one player's model and the other one?
Well,
Is it?
Yes, that's a great question. So for example, the utility function for groundwater users, you can see the decision variable from the NGOs, their effort level. So that
Okay.
decision variable should be plugged into their utility function, and then they can make a decision whether they should accept or not.
So
The
the
other thing is the coupling, the dynamic behavior of the upstream and downstream users. Which is captured by this indicator function, whether these two use the water volume is connected for these two users. So one impact is captured in terms of water availability, the water balance equation over time. The other part is that we have a direct decision variable from NGO's utility function in each of the utility, water users' utility function. And then for the NGOs in here, depending on what their optimal water consumption, what their optimal decision variable is, then that goes to their available budget. So that's how this is played. So technically, we need to solve the game, find their optimal solution, plug it into their utility function to find.
Well, because this is where I have a problem, this notion of optimal solution. If it's a game, it's an equilibrium solution. So you have 12 players, for instance, and so are you solving for a Nash equilibrium between these 12 players, taking into account the announcement of the NGO, who is a leader somehow, and solving for a Stackelberg equilibrium?
So we don't have that Stackelberg structure like the leader follower or even Nash equilibrium primary because this is not a static game. So this is solve. So what happens? We solve this for season one. The parameters get updated, and then we solve it for the second season, and that's how we have the trajectory of decision variables.
This I understand, but how can you solve for one player if in the objective and the constraint of this particular player, you have the decisions of the others? So you need to solve for an equilibrium. And
That's a great. So we do have. So first we solve for the water decision because those are solved analytically, and so we do have there, for example, P like the equation for the water consumption, which is also a function of the effort level. So if we plot first, we solve it for water users analytically, and then we plug it into the NGO's model. Then we solve it for their effort level. So that's how this is done.
at the user's level, what kind of equilibrium you are getting? You are getting a feedback Nash equilibrium, I guess.
No. So here we are solving this using the Bellman equation function. So for that, what is that optimal consumption for that time interval? So that's what we have. And then we update the willingness to participate for the following season, and then we solve the game. So what is that optimal solution for the water user? But for NGOs, clearly it's near optimal. Um,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? And the structure of this game, it's a linear quadratic game, or I'm missing something?
So it is definitely quadratic. So the cost function is quadratic. And then to again, we mainly use this Hamiltonian Jacobian function to derive the analytical solutions.
Okay.
But it is definitely nonlinear.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. Uh, yes, Carlos, please go ahead.
If I may ask, so the previous slide, I don't know, like before slide 13, you had these parameters. If you could elaborate a bit more, uh, maybe slide 12 or 11, I don't know. We can,
So I could barely hear you. If you can repeat your
Yeah,
question
sorry,
louder.
we cannot hear you, Carlos.
no? Uh, okay. What about now? Is it
Yeah,
better?
It's
it's
much better.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. If you can come, go like few slides to the left, like maybe 11 or oh, maybe this one. Yeah. So here we have these parameters, environmental benefit coefficient, and before you had something like that. So here's, if I understand this, if you could elaborate a bit more. So the idea is like the more stock we have, the happier we are. And do you calibrate these parameters or how do you deal with those parameters?
No, so what we did clearly to parameterize this game, we used some publicly available data sets and making sure that those parameters make sense for the region that we have selected. So we are not doing any parameter calibration. What we are doing, okay, this is the average environmental benefit obtained from these data sets that we have. And that's the reason that we did sensitivity analysis because we didn't
So,
solve
so
it
the
for now.
interpretation here is that the surface water users are happier when there is more resource just because of just to enjoy the
Right.
resource,
That was one of the
but
assumptions.
without extracting it, right? Okay.
Yes, that was one of the assumptions, so that we can have that parameter in the utility function.
Thank you. I mean, just because I tried to do something like that as well and wanted to get
Yeah.
like your point of view, but yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So may I ask one, Josh?
Sure.
Yes, Arsham, please go ahead.
Yeah. Again, my question about the structure. Um, so am I correct saying that the groundwater user solves an optimization problem, not the game. Or actually the objective function of a groundwater user depends on the NGO's action, or is it independence?
No, these are dependent because if you look at the utility
Uh-huh.
function, so they have a decision variable, effort level for the NGO. So that's how they can solve it. And if you even look at this one, their optimal decision variable is a function of the NGO's effort level. So that's how these are connected.
Okay, so it is actually a game, but so what confuses me is the way how you solve it. So you say that you solve the game separately for each season, but technically you have an infinite horizon game. So you have to, so when designing your like policy, you must take into account all future time steps.
Yes.
And ignoring the future is kind of it's not probably Nash, so probably it's something like myopic behavior, or am I missing something?
No, no, you are right on. So we are integrating from zero to infinity, right? But then we need to define in dynamic, we define this decision epochs. And for this application, one season is long enough because behavior in summer can be completely different from the other season. So that one season is long enough to update our strategies. And then when it comes to the fall season, based on what happened in the past, and they have the opportunity to re-optimize or make their decisions. But technically, one season is long enough for them to specifically for the shadow price, which is the future welfare, right, of the one additional volume of water in the river. But yes, we are integrating between zero and infinity, but we are defining this decision epochs so that they can adjust and update their strategy. Specifically, the parameters change. Demand over the summer is different from demand over the winter season, right?
But from the model, from the state equation or utility function, how would I understand that like the summer, let's say, ends now and tomorrow like the fall starts?
So
So
we are distinguishing between different seasons by populating different parameters. So their demand is different and the precipitation is different. The rate of entering water from aquifer to the river is different. So those are the changing dynamics that we have from one season to another season, and we end up with a different problem to solve.
mhm. But so I don't know. Can I ask one more
Oh,
question or?
Sure,
absolutely.
sure.
Okay, so if we just go back to your example with three seasons, so how would you like split the infinite horizon like interval into three parts? So
So again, you really need to look at the application, see, okay, if
no, I
one
just want
year,
to understand. I would like to understand the connection between the model and the illustration you're showing us. So we have like an infinite horizon. So we start today and never end, but also we have three seasons. So how those seasons are like incorporated into this infinite horizon setup?
so Ben, would you like to take that question? Because
Yes, thank you for
Ah,
your questions. Yeah. Actually, we can't considers the positive infinity. It shows that when we have the water consumptions, this model will be used and we capture the optimal water consumptions. In the further seasons, for example, the winter that we do not consider, we do not have any water consumption. So the what decision variables, the utility function for the consumption of water will be zero, but still we have the environmental effect that the water volume in the rivers can uh, received by the water users. So by using this optimal utility as utility function, we consider two setups. The setups that we have the demand waters and the setups that we do not have water demands. And it is the influence of our previous decision making on the further time intervals.
Oh, but time is continuous, so but
Yes.
there must be somehow the end of one season and the
Yes.
beginning of the next.
If you see the our papers in one part of the utility function, we showed that in the when the time limit is goes to the infinity, this utility function will be converged to the zero at the utility functions of that setup. And about the time intervals that you mentioned, the dynamic games enables us to model the time intervals that we have limited information. For example, we have the limited over information about the spring seasons. When we have the limited information about the spring season, we model that spring season and make the decisions, find the optimal decision variables. Then the structure of the game will be updated. For example, we are going to the summer. The structure of the game, which means, for example, shows that the revenue that the water users gained as a result of the consumption of water. For example, in the water, the value of water is more than the value of water in the spring. So the structure of the game will be updated. So the previous decision making doesn't help anymore and help us in that season. So we should find another decision optimal with the new set of the problems. And it continuously evolves. And as you can see from the left figures that Dr. Mohebbi shows, the decision making happens in each time interval separately.
So so when you like determine your policy, so you plan only for like T stages ahead, and
In
then
in the numerical example that we said, yes, just for show the applicability of the model, just we consider three seasons. But maybe in reality, depends on the crops, depends on the situation. It could be continuously continue over the time.
but when you make your decision, do you know how the parameters would change in the future?
No, no, because we do not know that, we have limited information. The structure of the dynamic games implement in this kind of problems that we have limited information about the structure of the game. So decision making happens in each time intervals. Then we go to the next one, and the structure of the game will be updated.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
And
Thank
So
going
in a
to
sense,
the case study, that might makes more sense. So that how we are actually implemented in a real world
In
problem.
fact, Artyom and my questions are mathematical questions. They are related to really the structure of a differential game. It's not clear to us, and it's more confusing now, to be honest, how you are considering an infinite planning horizon, and after that you are considering small pieces. I can understand that you can consider some small piece, and once you solve it, you move to the next one. Okay, because there is some updating going. But I cannot say that I'm solving an infinite planning horizon and starting by winter, and after that moving to another season, and that there are an updating, because the policy that you are getting from using Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation, especially if you are considering an infinite planning horizon, it's stationary. So
So I guess
this
that's
is
also that's a valid point, but that's one thing that we addressed in the paper, and we said, okay, one season we consider that one season is long enough to solve it for an optimal decision.
this is clearer, but in this case, in my opinion, the optimization problems should be written as such and not showing as if they were written for an infinite planning horizon. Anyway, because here in the audience we have a gang of people who spend their life doing differential games, so for this reason, it's not I would say the usual writing of the model. But now I understand. So you are solving for a season, updating, moving forward. This I can see the point and the relevance of doing it. Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So could you say in a sense that for each season, I'm kind of myopic? I only solve for season one, then I take that, whatever it is, and then I just only, so in a sense, it's this kind of myopia, right? Like it's, I don't really take into account the effects when I'm in season one, the effects it will have in season three. Am I understanding that correctly, or?
I think this is what is happening unless you can capture by the marginal value of the value function what would happen at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yes, if I understood well, I mean, I should start by reading the paper. What is happening in a season, it's somehow isolated from what is happening in the next one. You are updating, right? This is what
It's
Behnan
not
said.
isolated. The willingness of the water users in each in time intervals will be updated, and it goes to the next ones. The link
Sure.
between the
Yeah, yeah.
players, it's not completely isolated. Some parameters are, yes, isolated because the demands or something are not related to the previous one, but some parameters were influenced by the previous decisions.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure.
Yeah.
No, but when I say it's decoupled in the sense that when I am solving for winter now,
Mhm.
I'm not taking into account what is going to happen in 2 billion years in fall, because I have an infinite planning horizon. So in this sense, you are decoupling this problem and connecting the pieces.
Correct. That's correct. Okay.
Uh,
Those questions set the stage for this slide. Great question. So, up, while we were working on this project, our social science collaborators conducted interviews and surveys with farmers in the Red River Basin, and they found that NGOs generally lack information about users' willingness to participate, and only the water user themselves have that insight, which can influence how effectively incentives are designed. Uh, in addition, monetary incentives are typically implemented through the leasing of water permits, while non-monetary incentives also play a role. So we extended the framework to incorporate asymmetric information and uncertainty related to the water variability and demand, as shown in this slide. So this system is still involves two types of water users and considers a water permit trading system where each user holds their own water permit and is allowed to trade permits freely with their peers. Within the system, a single NGO acts as a service provider, aiming to design an efficient contract as an incentive offer, right? So the NGO's main objective is to create a flexible contract that accounts for the unique characteristic of each water user, the presence of asymmetric information and stochastic parameters, and social effects among peers and hydrological interactions at the basin level. So the service options offered by the NGO now include monetary incentives, which is leasing water permits from users, non-monetary incentives, providing metering technologies and consulting services to improve irrigation efficiency and related practices, and water trading, which enables users to buy or sell water permits with their peers, and the status quo, which users retain and fully utilize their allocated water permit without leasing or trading. The monetary incentive option is defined by three key elements: the lease term, length of the agreement in years, the lease back option, the ability of the water users to cancel the contract at the start of each decision epoch, and the lease payment, which is the amount paid for leasing during the contract. And we have the same as estate variables volume of water in the aquifer and the river. So here you can see the stochastic groundwater user utility function. We have water benefits through crop sales, expected revenue from leasing or trading water permits, expected cost of buying additional water permits, if any, and environmental benefits. And for the water balance equations in the constraint, we add the stochastic component through the standard Brownian motion. And this can be solved analytically where F inverse is the inverse cumulative distribution function of groundwater users' water demand. And in the equation, lambda is the environmental shadow price representing the economic value of an additional unit of aquifer water. Using Ito's lemma, we can calculate the mean and variance of the water volume in the aquifer, as you can see in this slide. One interesting observation is that the variance is indirectly related to the delta, which is the rate of water entering from aquifer to the river in the long term. And this means that increasing delta reduces the amount of water in the aquifer, and a lower aquifer volume leads to a smaller variance of the water level. Also, the expected aquifer volume and its variance are affected by both monetary and non-monetary incentives through their influence on the optimal water consumption. So specifically, an increasing in non-monetary incentives leads to higher long-term mean and variance of the aquifer water volume. Now, to capture the asymmetric information structure, we recognize that water users' willingness to participate in the conservation program is private and asymmetric. So the NGO only knows it lies within a given interval, as you can see here. So based on this uncertainty, the NGO can adopt one of the following strategies: risk seeking, which assumes the lowest value of willingness, which is the optimistic scenario; risk neutral, which considers the mean of the willingness interval; and risk averse, which assumes the highest value of willingness, which is a pessimistic scenario. We applied these models to the Red River Basin case study over a 1-year period. Why a 1-year period? Data availability, right, is one driver. So here, hydrologic units were used to define groundwater and surface water users, resulting in approximately 2,500 water users, so more than 2,000 water users, and that's the reason that we really need that scalability of the solution method. In this figure, for groundwater users, the HAWCs, or the hydrologic units, are color-coded. Blue represent HAWCs using water for irrigation during each time interval during each season, and yellow represent HAWCs or water users expected to accept only the monetary incentive, so the leasing option by the NGO. And gray are farmers or water users, which are expected to accept only the non-monetary incentives. And orange represent those which we expect them to have both types of incentives. Now, what we see throughout the year, the expected acceptance rate for monetary incentives increases from 20% in winter to around 40% in summer, and slightly rising to 44% in the fall. For non-monetary incentives, acceptance rate grows from 7% in the winter season to 32% in summer, reaching close to 40% in the fall. Now, this pattern highlights the complementary nature of the monetary and non-monetary incentives when peer effects are considered, right? Although non-monetary acceptance is initially low in winter, the effort levels allocated by the NGO for monetary incentive across different water users location, combined with the peer influence, substantially increased water users' willingness to participate, as we can see in the higher acceptance rate in the fall. The total expected volume of conserved water resulting from leasing follows a similar seasonal pattern that we had. And well, this part, the stochastic version, is still a work in progress, and we are currently verifying and refining the case study and the parameters that we are using, and we are working closely with our social science collaborators, making sure that this all makes sense and consistent with their surveys and interviews. And at the end, I would like to acknowledge our funding agency, the National Science Foundation, and a special thanks go to our collaborators from the University of Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and the University of Nebraska Lincoln, who provided us with data and valuable feedback. And with that, I would like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much.